Hey! Welcome to a little tutorial about all the new features of React 16. React 16 was a very big release for the world of React. It was probably the single most important release of React since React was released. And I think that's pretty safe to say because there's a lot of new features of React 16 that I want to tell you about today. I'm going to show you a little screencast of me coding some of those changes. But probably the biggest change in React 16 is something that you've heard about before, Fiber. Fiber was a very big deal for React 16 because it has laid the groundwork for many upcoming changes in React releases. I think the best way to explain the big deal with Fiber, aside from these new features that I'm going to tell you about a little bit later on in this video, is that Fiber lays the groundwork for the ability for React to do async rendering. You might be asking yourself, what the heck is async rendering? And that is a great question. So allow me to tell you what async rendering is. The best way to actually explain async rendering is to show an example. And this is an example that was created by the React core team. What you see here on the page is this website that has a little spinning rectangle in the top right of the screen. When you restart to render the page again, you can see that that square pauses for a second. And that is something that you might have experienced in your React applications in the past as well. You'll render something and then the screen kind of freezes. You get this thing called jank, which things kind of slow down. The big benefit of async rendering is, drumroll please, click this checkbox, and that square doesn't stop spinning. How is that possible? Well, with async rendering, what the React team has done is it's managed to create a process for rendering your React applications such that if, when React is doing work, it has work that takes longer than 16 milliseconds, which is when you'll see slowdown in the browser, it'll actually stop what it's doing, React will stop and give control back to the browser so that you can actually render the page, which is why when you have async rendering, things just look really nice and clean because React is rendering, it says, hey, I've taken up too much time, let me actually give that to the browser. Then the browser does its stuff and it takes back control and finishes what it needs to do. That is the big thing with React 16. I want to note that async rendering is not enabled in React 16. That is something that is coming in the future, but not right now. In any case, that's Fiber. That's a big deal with React 16. Another great thing about React 16 is better support for server-side rendering. Namely, it now supports streaming. So if you do render your React applications on the server, you can now stream that straight to the client. Again, very exciting. But I actually want to show you some new cool features that are a little bit more pragmatic, things that you'll actually use in your day-to-day applications more so than async rendering or streaming. To do that, I want to actually I've created a dummy React 15 application that I'm going to, with you, following my faithful viewer, I will be transforming from a React 15 application to a React 16 application. Any questions, please do respond down below, and I will definitely be answering them asynchronously. So in any case, I have here this React 15 application. It's a simulated version of a Twitter application. You have data here, you can load new data, and your data is right there. Awesome. So then I have over here the basic HTML layout, and I have here the main code for our program. The way that I'm actually including React on this page is via a CDN. I'm not using NPM or anything like that, just for demonstration purposes, but React 16 is out. You can use it on NPM if you want to. This is just a demo for me to show you. First thing I want to show is us upgrading from React 15 to React 16. Changing from those 15 CDNs to 16 CDNs, we'll save. The page just refreshes, and congratulations, we have just upgraded to React 16. That is probably the biggest deal about React 16 is that it is fully backwards compatible. Caveat, if you have solved all deprecation warnings in your console beforehand. So let me go actually roll back to React 15 because I want to show some things that are pretty cool about this. So you can see here, we have this time ago in the DOM. This is something you've seen on GitHub everywhere, but what you see here is that it's surrounded by a span tag and you have all these comments from React text. So if we actually jump into the code, we can see we have our app, which renders a page, which this page then renders a array of data cells. And then in this data cells, we have this header, which we have the pretty date component. And here we actually have where we're taking a JavaScript date object and converting that into a nice, pretty from now string. But the thing is, we're wrapping this in a span because up until React 16, the only thing that a React component could return is either a React element or null. However, with React 16, you can now return either strings or fragments from your React components. So let's take advantage of that right here. We're going to remove this span, go over here, remove the span as well, hit save, and we get an error. Did you catch why? Well, you have this error message, a valid React element or null must be returned. React element or null, right? That's the keywords there. And I think you may have picked up why that is the case. It's because we actually are only using React 15. So let's actually go back to React 16. Et voila, here we go. And if we actually inspect the DOM here, you can see that it is a lot cleaner than the version in React 15. And that is just through the magic of React 16. So that is the first thing that's very exciting about React 16 is you can now return strings from components. Another very exciting thing about React 16 is that you can also return fragments. What is a fragment? If you see here, we have our root application, and this root app is returning a div, which is encapsulating our header tag and the page. And if you look in the DOM here, you have the div, which is what we're rendering inside of, and this nested div. And that doesn't seem great to me, because this is really an implementation detail of React, not really what we want for application. And what you can actually do now in React is rather than returning to back up until React 16, you always had to return one root React component or element from a React component for it to be valid React. And that is no longer the case in React 16. You can actually now return an array, or as they call it, a fragment. And because it's an array, it has to actually have commas to separate each React component. Save that, and all looks good. You can ignore that. However, this is not the most pretty way of creating fragments in your applications. Who wants to make these arrays everywhere? So the React core team also agrees with that. And as a way to combat that, they've actually created a new top-level React component called React Fragment. So I can go back and undo that, and actually turn this into react.fragment, hit save, and we have the same result. We actually inspect the DOM here. We can see that we have our div, and that is it. There's no nested div inside of there. So we actually do that in here as well. Take this div of our page component, turn it to react.fragment, hit save, and that other div is also gone. Look how clean our DOM is. Look how clean it is. It's so clean. It's so nice. And actually, the React team took it one step further. The React core team also added a new Jsx syntax for fragments. So rather than having to use this component, instead what you can actually do is take those, delete that, and use this new Jsx fragment syntax. We hit save, and everything still works as expected. What this JSX transforms into is React.fragment. But this is some sugar that you can use if you don't want to always have to import the fragment component into your applications. You can see the syntax highlighting here is a little bit off. The ecosystem's still catching up to this new JSX syntax. But for now, for syntax purposing, I'm just going to keep it as React.fragment. So that's very cool. We have strings that we can return from components. We can also return fragments. Now, in an application here, you have the ability to load new data, right? And we have here this loading bar. And the problem is that we can't get this loading bar to stretch the entire width of the page because where it's being rendered inside of has margins on it. And prior to React 16, this would be pretty hard to fix. You'd have to either inject it outside of its context, or use like Redux to control whether you're having a loading state and showing things there. It was a very, very, very messy ordeal. However, that is no longer the case with React 16. Instead, there's a new feature called portals. And portals allow you to render any React component in any DOM element on the page. So let's take a look at what that looks like. We can go into our HTML page. I'm going to copy our app div, add notifications as a new top-level div. Remember, we're only rendering our application inside of app. This is just an extra div. I can now see our notification component. Let's jump up to there. Nope. Let's go jump up. Here we go, notification. Let's actually grab this notifications L equals document.get element by ID. And there we go. And then in our notification component, rather than returning just the straight JSX, what we can actually do is call React DOM.createPortal, And the first argument to that is any React component. And the second argument is the DOM node where it should be rendered inside of. So now if I save that, refresh the page, and hit load new data, you can see it's showing up there. And if we actually inspect the DOM hierarchy, you can see up here, this notifications DOM is being modified. Let's actually make something static so we can inspect it a little bit more easily. Let's grab this, copy it twice, make it very nice. And we have here in the DOM, those notifications are being rendered outside of the actual DOM hierarchy of your React component. That is wild. That is a very, very cool feature. Now I hit load new data, adds it in there. Again, just very, very cool. What's also great about this is that if you have some state that's being shared inside of your React component, it'll also be shared in that portal element as well. And this opens up a whole host of possibilities of how to render new React components. The first thing that you can think about is making modals easier, because when you want to make a modal, you want to render that outside your actual DOM hierarchy, so that is easier. Tooltips, banners, notifications. There's also an amazing demo online of somebody using portals to render a pop-up using the same React state in that pop-up window. Very, very exciting things with this React portal API. So I'm going to do this. We don't need this right now. Very, very cool. We got portals. And the last thing that I want to talk about that's very exciting is a new API that has been added to the React Component API called Component Did Catch. Now you can see here in this React application that every so often you might encounter an error. And actually what I want to do is roll back real quick to our React 15 version to show what happens there. So I'm discarding these two things. We're back where we were. If we load new data with an error, this is a forced error, we can see we get this error in the console. And you see that we cannot read property username with undefined. And that's just a normal JavaScript error. However, what happens to your React application is that it is now in this error recoverable state. Like there's no way to get back from this. You are just dead, fish out of water. The only way to fix this is to refresh the page. So there's a way to actually gracefully recover from errors now in React 16. So let's actually undo this and undo this and save. And then this is like that. Cool, we're back where we were. So the way that you can actually do this now is we're going to make a new component and we're going to call it an error boundary component. Go up here, error boundary. There's a new API method called component did catch, where you get the error object and an info object. We can log that, oh no, an error. That said, we'll say error.message. And then by default, this component is just going to return the children that is being given to it, right, like that. However, what we're going to actually do is add some state into this as well. We're going to say has error. By default, it's false. And then in here, we're going to say, oh, we found an error. So let's actually say has error equals true. Then actually here, what we're going to do is we're going to say return this dot state has error. And we're going to say doom, dismay, horror. Otherwise, we'll return this.props.children. So we have this new component. Let's grab it. And let's actually wrap every data cell with this component. Take that and that, and we're going to yank this, put it there, hit save. So now, when we load new data with an error in our React 16 application, look at this. We have these doom, dismay, horror, 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 horror. Where's horror? Horror. Awesome. And that's very exciting. So that means that you can actually opt in to where you want to actually handle when errors occur in your React application. By default, you wouldn't really want to show this. You can actually just return null to make it a little bit less noticeable to the end user. So you can add load new data. However, your application is still usable. You can keep loading new data. If you all of a sudden get data that works again, it just starts working. So that's very exciting. That means you can actually now selectively recover your React application when an error recurs. There's one gotcha that I want to talk about in the component did catch is that it behaves like try catch, which means that you can't add the component did catch method to the component where the error is occurring. Which is to say that if you have a try catch statement, if you have a try catch, and you throw an error in here, you still have to catch that in a parent try catch, which is the same deal of componented catch with React components. You still have to have a parent component to catch when an error occurs in a child component. But that was the full whirlwind tour of all the new things of React 16. You are now ready to take on all the new features and make your React applications supercharged with all the React 16 features. You learned about the ability to return strings from a component, return fragments from a component, learned about the new React.fragment component type, the JSX transform for React.fragment. You also learned about portals, which is a whole world of opportunity, and you also learned about error boundaries. So then, very exciting features. And again, lest we forget, Fiber, which is again not something that you can use right now, but it is something that will be coming down the pike with React. So very exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing what you make, how you make use of this new features and toys. If you have any questions, please do respond down below. I'm happy to answer them. And tune in again for another tutorial when there's things to talk about. Hopefully you'll learn some things good. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you then. Bye.